Thank you for watching this powerful story of resilience, betrayal, and quiet redemption. If Danielle's journey moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Every week, we share real-life inspired stories of individuals, especially those over 50, who rise above injustice, rebuild after heartbreak, and reclaim their lives with dignity and power. By subscribing, you won't miss a single episode filled with courage, wisdom, and truth. Your support helps us continue telling these important stories and creating a community where experience is valued, voices are heard, and healing is possible. So please, hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone. And if you've ever lived through a betrayal and came back stronger, we'd love to hear your story in the comments below. I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 25-year-old boyfriend. I'm taking all our money with me. The message came in at exactly 3 a.m. Gulf Coast time, just as I wrapped up a grueling 14-hour shift offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. My name is Danielle Graves. I'm 50 years old and have spent the last 25 years working on oil rigs around the world. My hands were still slick with grease when I opened the message from Aaron, my husband of 17 years. I stared at the glowing screen, barely processing the second message that followed, a screenshot of our joint bank account showing a balance of 2 cents, where there had once been $138,000. He'd even added a laughing face emoji, like this was some kind of joke. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't throw my phone into the Gulf. I just sat quietly on my bunk in the tiny cabin I shared with 2 engineers and typed back, "Okay, good luck." Then I powered the phone down and headed for the showers. The next morning, I skipped breakfast and went straight to the equipment check. My second-in-command, Luis, kept glancing at me during the safety walkthrough but knew better than to pry. We had a team of 18 on this rig depending on us. There was no room for emotional breakdowns. Not 80 miles off the Louisiana coast, where one wrong decision could turn a platform into a fireball. At lunch, I opened my laptop. There it was, an email from a lawyer named Griffin, stating that Aaron had filed for divorce and was claiming abandonment. He wanted alimony based on my high-income profession and had already moved his new partner into our home in Corpus Christi. I closed the laptop, put on my hard hat, and went back to work. That night, I wrote one message. Not to Aaron, but to my cousin Layla, a financial advisor in Dallas. "Activate protocol Snowbird," I wrote. That phrase went back to our childhood. No further explanation was needed. For minutes later, her reply popped up, "Already moving the assets. Don't respond to anything until you're home." I still had 13 days left in this rotation. 13 days of brutal heat, 12-hour shifts, and ocean wind cutting through steel catwalks. But the job paid well, and I needed that final paycheck. I could have requested emergency leave. Everyone would have understood. But what would that change? Aaron had already taken what he could. No sense in walking away from the only thing still giving me a return. That night, our platform supervisor, Carl, stopped by my bunk. "You good?" he asked, and he wasn't just asking about the operations report. "Everything's under control," I replied. Because it was. I met Aaron 18 years ago at my sister's barbecue in Victoria, Texas. I was 32, between contracts in the North Sea, helping out with repairs at the family ranch. He was 29, charming, funny, freshly divorced. He said he admired my grit, my independence. I liked that he didn't flinch when I talked about drill pressure or turbine failures. We got married in under a year. It felt like the right thing. I'd already bought my house, paid in full with stock from a buyout on a small offshore firm. My career was stable, my path clear. Aaron promised to handle things at home. I'd build our future. For a while, it worked. 2 months offshore, 1 month at home. The money was life-changing. In 6 months, I earned more than some couples made in 5 years. But around year 10, things began to change, quietly, almost unnoticeably. He'd complain when I missed his birthday. He questioned why I took the Brazil contract. Now I knew why. He'd been planning his exit. But he'd underestimated one thing. I was a lot harder to take down than he remembered. Hints had been surfacing for a while, passing remarks about how her friends' husbands never missed birthday dinners, subtle digs about always eating alone. I didn't put the pieces together then. The year I turned 47, Aaron stopped asking when I'd fly home. No more weekend selfies. Our video chats went from warm to mechanical. I chalked it up to the quiet transformation that comes after years of distance, routine taking the place of spontaneity. That winter, I walked into a house I'd barely recognized. The rustic decor we'd picked together was gone. In its place, sleek modern furniture, cold gray walls, and some abstract paintings I'd never seen. When I asked what happened, he said flatly, "You needed something new." I didn't push. I should have. 2 months before my current rotation, I noticed strange withdrawals from our joint account. When I asked, he claimed it was for roofing repairs. I drove past the house the day before flying back out. No construction, no contractor, but there was a charcoal-colored Audi in our driveway. For weeks ago, the check-in stopped. No replies to calls, just a message saying he was swamped with a new business venture. I almost canceled my deployment. Almost. But I told myself to trust the man I'd shared a life with for 17 years. 3 days ago, our old neighbor Carol texted a photo. A moving truck in front of my home. "Didn't want to assume, but you okay?" was all it said. I didn't answer. Instead, I waited. Some truths reveal themselves better in silence. After my shift ended the following evening, the rig's emergency line rang. It was Layla, my cousin. "You sitting?" "Go ahead." She's been siphoning money for over a year. Layla's tone was matter-of-fact, clinical, like a surgeon walking me through the damage. She opened a private bank account using her maiden name. Small transfers at first, $1, $500, $2,200. Then it ramped up. Over the past 3 months, she's moved a total of $214,000. Not just the $138,000 from your savings. He's been hiding more. I went quiet. That was more than what we'd even kept jointly. "There's worse," she added. 6 months ago, he submitted paperwork to change the beneficiary on your life insurance. And 2 months after that, forged your name to pull a $40,000 home equity loan. The signature doesn't even try to match yours. The room seemed to warp around me for a moment. The sound of the rig's machinery hummed beneath the floor like a living, breathing thing. 17 years of shared life, and he'd spent the last 14 months slowly writing me out of it. The guy? I asked finally. Derek Hall, 25. Former yoga instructor. No real work history in the last few years. Had flings with 2 other women in their 40s. Both ended when the money dried up. Layla lowered her voice. "There's a charge for 2 one-way plane tickets to Miami. Departure date, next Tuesday." He hadn't just betrayed me. He was trying to vanish. I ended the call without another word. Just sat on the edge of my bunk, hands folded, staring into the dark. Memories began to reorder themselves in my mind. Late-night phone calls he took outside, the sudden obsession with protein shakes, the constant complaints about budget strain despite our steady finances. What hurt most wasn't that he cheated. It was the calculation. The patience. The long, deliberate process of hollowing out our life, smiling at me across FaceTime, pocketing the deposits I sent home. He hadn't stumbled into this. He'd engineered it. And now he thought he'd walk away untouched. He was wrong. Because the woman he thought he could outmaneuver, she wasn't done yet. Something inside me shifted. The ache didn't fade, it calcified. I walked to the storage cubby near my bunk, pulled out my laptop, and powered it on. I opened a private email, one that only Layla and I used. Then I logged into the LLC we'd quietly established nearly a decade ago after watching a friend lose every cent in her divorce. We called it Granite Creek Holdings, named after the stream that ran behind my grandmother's property in Kerrville. The balance flashed across the screen, $1.6 million. For the last 8 years, I'd been channeling 70% of my overseas earnings into that account. Everything above board, declared on taxes, but legally protected by the shell structure Layla had created. Completely independent of marital assets. Untouchable. I typed a brief message to my attorney in Dallas, initiate lockstep protocol. Then I closed the laptop, washed my face, and headed to the galley for coffee. For the first time in a week, I actually felt hungry. 38 hours later, I landed at George Bush Intercontinental. Layla was waiting at the gate with a burner phone and a thick file folder. As we made our way to the parking garage, she said, "He's been calling your main number nonstop since yesterday. He knows something's wrong." "What about the account?" "Frozen. Bank flagged the transfer as suspicious. They need you to verify it in person." He's panicking. He doesn't know I'm back? Not unless he's psychic. Only you, me, and your lawyer know. She handed me her tablet. But here's where it gets more interesting. I scrolled through text messages between Aaron and someone saved as Derek. They joked about me still being offshore. Talked about the condo they planned to buy in Miami. How they were decorating it. How they deserved the money more than I did. But then I hit a thread from 3 days ago. Aaron, bank froze the funds. Danielle has to confirm in person. What do we do? Derek, she's still offshore, right? Say there's a family emergency. You're still legally married. Aaron, she's not answering. Derek, try harder. We need that money before closing. Or we pivot to plan B. Aaron, I don't like plan B. Derek, it's just a payout. She works a high-risk job. Accidents happen. I handed the tablet back to Layla. My voice was even. Is that admissible? She used your old Apple ID to set up her phone. Never changed the login. Everything backed up automatically to your iCloud. We downloaded it legally. We didn't stop at my house. We went straight to my lawyer's office. Thomas, calm and precise as ever, already had the paperwork ready. Divorce filing, criminal fraud complaint for the forged signature on the home equity loan, and an emergency injunction to lock down all assets. There's one snag. Thomas said once yesterday, Aaron filed a petition claiming domestic emotional abuse and coercive control. He's requesting a temporary protective order and exclusive use of your property. I laughed. I've been 6,000 miles away for nearly 2 months. He nodded. Doesn't matter. This is about optics. His attorney is trying to pre-frame you as the aggressor. If the judge buys it, it could delay everything. So he wants to bar me from my own home, while Derek lives in it. Yes. I leaned back in my chair. Then we're not just filing for divorce anymore. Thomas raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? We're going to make sure every dollar, every lie, and every signature is examined. No more silence. No more patience. I've spent 17 years supporting that man. He wants war. I reached for the pen. Let's give him a masterclass. Please, just call them and say it's okay, Aaron begged in the voicemail. I'm terrified. Everything's frozen. I don't know what to do. We'd never discussed safer investments. 2 weeks ago, I might have believed the panic in his voice. Now, it was just another script. She's unraveling, Thomas said over lunch. The closing date for that condo in Miami is 5 days out. They need access to those funds or they lose everything. What's the next step? I asked. The emergency hearing is at 3 p.m. Judge Rayburn is presiding. She has zero tolerance for fabricated abuse claims. We've got your alibi locked down. Travel records, employment logs, and security access logs, solid. And the bank? We've submitted a motion requesting full return of the frozen assets to you alone. But there's more. He pushed a folder across the table. Your neighbor, Carol, sent this to my office this morning. Inside were photos of moving crews carting off furniture. Not just any furniture, my mother's oak chest, the antique sideboard from my grandmother's dining room, even the hand-built rocker I'd restored during my first offshore rotation. They're stripping the house, Thomas confirmed. They're not waiting to find out what happens. They're planning to vanish. I closed the file and looked up. Change of plan. Layla and Thomas exchanged a glance. I want to go home. That's not advisable, Thomas started. Not to confront them, I clarified. To watch. From Carol's house. I want to be there when they're served. I want Aaron to see me. I want to witness the exact second the lie collapses. Thomas gave a slow nod. I'll handle it. As we left the restaurant, my burner phone buzzed. A message from Carol. They're loading the cedar desk. The one you refinished. Thought you'd want to know. That desk had belonged to my grandfather. He'd written letters home from World War II at that desk. I'd spent 3 weekends restoring it in my garage. Some violations weren't just financial. They stole your history. We made the 6-hour drive to Corpus Christi that night. Thomas arranged for the sheriff to serve the papers at 9 a.m. sharp. Layla coordinated logistics with Carol, who offered her guest room without hesitation. She was a retired drilling supervisor, 30 years in the Gulf. She didn't ask questions. She just brewed coffee and handed me a spare house key. They don't have a clue you're here? I asked. Not a whisper, she replied. They've been packing nonstop. Trucks came and went all day. More expected tomorrow. Anyone else show up? Woman with a clipboard yesterday. Probably a real estate agent. Took exterior photos and measurements. I made a quick call to Thomas. He said he'd pull property filings first thing. Unable to sleep, I sat at Carol's kitchen table around 3 a.m., the glow of my laptop cutting through the dark. I reviewed the evidence again, bank statements showing transfers labeled as utility payments but wired to shell companies. Phone logs tracing nightly conversations between Aaron and Derek. Hotel charges in Corpus on weekends. He said he was visiting his mother. Every page told the same story. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was an operation. A slow, meticulous extraction. Months of deception threaded together like a woven net, designed to catch me unprepared. But they'd underestimated one thing. I wasn't fragile. I was forged under pressure. Just like every beam I'd helped install offshore. And by morning, the collapse wouldn't be mine. It would be theirs. By the time the sun broke across the Texas horizon, Thomas had sent confirmation. Aaron had listed our home with a real estate firm 2 days prior, priced 30% below market, clearly designed for a fast sale. He'd forged my name on the listing documents. At 8:30 a.m., I stood at Carol's kitchen window, eyes fixed across the street. Aaron and Derek were busy filling the back of Derek's Audi with small, portable valuables. I spotted my father's watch case, my grandmother's framed photographs, and a velvet pouch I knew contained my mother's brooch. At 8:45, a large rental truck rumbled to a stop in front of the house. 3 movers exited and headed for the door, right on cue. 5 minutes later, an unmarked sedan rolled to a stop behind them, boxing the truck in. 2 uniformed deputies stepped out, followed by a stern-looking woman in a gray pantsuit. Thomas had dispatched a court liaison to ensure the papers were served without delay. It's time, I said quietly. Carol gave a solemn nod as I walked toward the street. I hung back just beyond the front walk as the officers knocked. Aaron answered. Annoyance flickered across her face until they identified themselves. Her expression turned from confusion to panic. We have documents to deliver, one deputy announced. To both residents. Aaron called for Derek, who strolled up behind her, casually slipping his arm around her waist. That was when I stepped into view. Erin's jaw slackened. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed as fear twisted her features. Danielle, she breathed. You're supposed to be offshore. Not today, I said calmly. I gave a slight nod. The deputies handed over the paperwork, emergency protective order, seizure and freeze of all joint accounts, criminal complaint for fraud, cancellation of the real estate listing, and the formal initiation of divorce proceedings, on grounds of deception and criminal collusion. You can't do this. Derek barked, puffing his chest. She's scared of you. Your claim was thrown out this morning, I replied coldly. Turns out it's hard to intimidate someone when you're 6,000 miles away. The judge had questions, especially about your texts discussing Plan B involving my life insurance. Derek paled. He had no comeback. Erin stepped forward, her voice trembling. This is all a mistake. I was just organizing our things. Preparing our future? I cut in, motioning toward the moving van. Saving our marriage by draining our accounts? Securing our future by forging my name and selling my house. She opened her mouth, but no words followed. You have 30 minutes to collect personal effects only, the court liaison said firmly. Toiletries and clothing. All property stays for inventory. They were escorted inside. I didn't wait. Where are you going? Erin called after me as I turned down the walk. I didn't answer. I was already home. 3 weeks later, we sat across from each other in the courtroom. I was with Thomas. Erin and her attorney occupied the opposite table. Derek, predictably, was missing. He'd disappeared 2 days after being served, along with what remained of Erin's jewelry and her emergency cash stash. It was exactly the pattern Layla had traced. The judge was methodical. She reviewed each file, bank transactions, emails, messages, forged listings, travel logs. When she reached the part where Derek and Erin discussed Plan B and my accidental death, she stopped. She looked directly at Erin. Mrs. Graves, are you familiar with the legal consequences of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud? Or worse? Erin's lawyer leaned over, whispering furiously in her ear. It wasn't like that, Erin stammered. Derek was just. Her voice trailed off. There were no more lies left to spin. Not in that courtroom. Not anymore. I was just joking. I never meant. Save it for the criminal court, the judge cut her off firmly. This courtroom is concerned only with the equitable distribution of property and the legal termination of marriage. She resumed reviewing the files in front of her. Every so often, she paused, eyebrows raised in quiet disbelief. When she finally set the documents aside and removed her glasses, the silence in the room was absolute. In over 3 decades on the bench, she began, her voice low but resolute, I've seldom encountered a clearer example of deliberate financial manipulation within a marital relationship. She looked directly at Erin. You funneled joint funds into private accounts, forged legal documentation, and made preparations to leave the state while concealing those actions from your spouse. Her gaze shifted toward me. It softened slightly. As for Ms. Graves, she continued, although the formation of a holding entity could appear questionable on its face, the records show full transparency with federal and state filings. You consistently covered household costs, declared all income, and made no attempt to hide your assets, only to safeguard them from the kind of breach this court is now addressing. Her ruling was swift and unequivocal. Every dollar Erin had funneled out was ordered returned to me. The house title was confirmed in my name alone. Her claim for alimony was denied outright. Most notably, the judge referred the evidence of document tampering and financial conspiracy to the district attorney for possible prosecution. Outside the courthouse, Erin tried to speak, tears glistening in her eyes, her mouth moving like she was still acting for a part. I walked past her without stopping. Some endings don't require closure. Just distance. 6 months later, I stood on the wraparound porch of a cedar cabin tucked away in the Bitterroot Valley outside Missoula, Montana. I'd bought the 40-acre plot 5 years earlier through Granite Creek Holdings, thinking of it as a place to retire someday. Erin never knew it existed. Now it was home. Erin's charges were reduced under a plea agreement. No prison, but 5 years on probation and a court-ordered restitution schedule she'd likely never finish paying. Last I heard, she was back in Oklahoma, living with a cousin and ringing up groceries in a strip mall outside Tulsa. Derek had predictably resurfaced in Arizona, now dating a recently divorced cardiologist. His trail of destruction remained uninterrupted. I had officially retired from the oil company. After 27 years in the field, North Sea, West Africa, Brazil, and the Gulf, I had nothing left to prove. My portfolio, savings, and royalty checks from a modest gas well in Arkansas meant I'd never want for anything. Carol called now and then from Corpus. She said the new family who bought my old house had planted a vegetable garden in the backyard. I was glad for that. That place deserved fresh starts, just not mine. She'd helped me pack what mattered: my father's books, my mother's china, a few handwritten letters I couldn't throw away. The rest we gave away or hauled to charity. That afternoon, the mail brought an envelope from Layla. Final dissolution paperwork for Granite Creek Holdings. Everything transferred, taxes paid, the books closed. The sun dipped behind the ridge. I poured a neat bourbon and settled into the porch swing I'd built over the summer. For the first time in years, there were no alarms set. No schedule to keep. No one calling from across the ocean to ask when I'd be home or why I wasn't there yet. Just stillness. Wind through pine needles. Peace. My phone buzzed once. A Canadian energy firm offering a consulting contract, generous terms, no field time, just experience on call. I'll consider it, I told the rep. And I would. Eventually. But not tonight. Tonight was for me. For silence. For freedom. For the life I'd reclaimed on my terms.